lots of brouhaha around Activision Blizzard at the moment. Now, we've followed the Activision Blizzard nightmare from start to finish. It's pretty bad. The company continues to be mired in legal action, facing allegations of systemic, harassment of women, discrimination in terms of salary structure, workload. They had a lawsuit in France where one of their offices they told a bunch of people, we're shutting it down, you're losing your jobs, and then they rehired some people back for the same job on a reduced salary, even though the premise of them being fired was you were surplus to requirements. They've had just lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And the Wall Street Journal has basically been absolutely wrecking Bobby Kotick from start to finish, showing what we all know. Bobby Kotick is a terrible person. Bobby Kotick is a greedy person. Bobby Kotick is a liar and a hypocrite. This has been proven repeatedly. These are indeed objective statements of fact. In fact, the only thing that I think would sort of constitute opinion is he's a terrible person. But if you're guilty of all the other things, I think that might be objective fact as well. And so he found himself around about the same time as our old chum Reginald's investigation dropped. Guess what? There was another lawsuit aimed at Bobby Kotick. And you can see here, this was New York City sued Activision Blizzard, and they were saying that Bobby Kotick is unfit to negotiate the upcoming Microsoft buyout. Now remember, Bobby Kotick had underperformed so terribly as a CEO because all of this happened on his watch. It led to a position where their share price dipped so much and people internally wanted him and all his henchmen out of the company that it enabled a predatory acquisition by Microsoft. Remember, Phil Spencer said the only reason we were even remotely interested in making this purchase now is essentially the share price had dropped so much and we were hearing so many concerning things that we knew it wasn't going to go back up, that we were able to swoop in and buy one of our major, media rivals, get their portfolio on board, and now we're in the process of essentially overseeing all the due diligence, and it's not even going to be a smooth acquisition because American Congress, the Monopolies Commission, they all fucking hate Bobby Kotick too, so they're going to be sticking their fucking fingers in the gumbo every step of the way. So I think we're still another year, 2 years away from it being official. So anyway, Activision Blizzard is facing yet another lawsuit. This one was filed by the New York City Employees Retirement Service System and Pension Funds, representing the city's fire department, police, and teachers. The suit, which was published in full over on Axios, claims that the CEO, Bobby Kotick, was unfit to negotiate a sale of the company to Microsoft and made the deal in part to escape liability for his roles in enabling workplace misconduct and abuse. The plaintiff says the lawsuit arises from an October 2021 demand to inspect Activision Blizzard's books and records as part of an investigation into its board of directors, specifically its failure to maintain a safe and non-discriminatory working environment for its specifically minority and female employees, and failure to take action in response to repeated grave allegations of misconduct, discrimination, and harassment by Activision senior executives. Now remember, before they had the big evidence shredding party they had over there, and before their head of legal counsel quit, and then they had to replace that person, remember it was also reported publicly that their HR department had received these complaints, then told other executives about the complaints, and then those executives basically pressurized and harassed the complainants, and nothing got resolved. So these terrible practices are a matter of public record, but people want to nail it down, specify the process, who said what, who fucked up. Activision partially complied, according to the complaint, but then on January 18th, while the inspection was ongoing, the company announced it was being acquired by Microsoft. The plaintiffs say that agreement undervalues Activision Blizzard, not only on the basis of the share price premium, which the suit describes as a paltry 1.16%, but also because it also does not account for the value of derivative claims the plaintiffs were developing separately against Activision Blizzard. Those claims will go away if and when Activision Blizzard become a Microsoft subsidiary. The deal happened so quickly, and at such a discount, the plaintiffs allege, because members of Activision Blizzard's board of directors, and Kotick in particular, faced a strong likelihood of liability for breaches of fiduciary duty for failing to address the allegations of widespread misconduct at this company. So remember as well, there were a number of people prepping to sue Bobby Kotick over a number of things. I've talked about lawsuits that even fell by the wayside. Like when Bungie left the Activision Blizzard portfolio, there were a number of people who wanted to sue Bobby Kotick and the board there for fiduciary duty as well, because less products obviously devalues the portfolio overall, and Bungie talked about how terrible, the whole process of working with Activision Blizzard was, and how they were focusing on things they didn't want to do and focusing on monetary methods that they didn't want to. I mean, I should have, if I'd prepped a little bit better tonight, I would have tied all of this into a huge stream about Diablo Immortal and just how terrible that is. I mean, the absolute outrageous predatory monetary practices around that game, and I will get into that. Yeah, there is a fantastic video about it by a chap whose name escapes me, but it is called, the Immoral Practices of Diablo Immortal, I believe. You should go watch it. It's a really illuminating watch. It's about an hour long, but it is worth your time. Josh Hayes Strife. Or Josh Strife Hayes, whichever way round. And I'm going to do my own, because there's a few little other bits and pieces that have come to light, including, by the way, guess what? Journalists fucking up again and writing up headlines without doing their due diligence and even looking at the cursory facts of the story. Who could see that coming in games journalism? But anyway, I haven't got that now. But bottom line is, one of the things that Bungie cited was, look, we don't want to turn our games into fucking, loot box gacha game nightmares, which ever since Activision Blizzard have sort of become hyper-focused on mobile. Remember, in an interview, they said, we are a primarily mobile platform now, which, is it any wonder you get things like Diablo Immortal? There's no sign of it changing. If you think we're ever going to get back to the time when Blizzard made good games, it's gone. It's dead. It's over. Look somewhere else. They are the new EA. It is. They make trash. They make hyper money focused gouging trash. That's all it is. That's all they'll ever make forever. They're done. Maybe the Microsoft acquisition will change it. Probably not. If you wonder why, there's no content in the few good games they've got left and the few games you like, you wonder why. It's like, wow, we haven't had an update in Overwatch for 2 fucking years, and you just sat there, I want more characters with feet. It's because all they care about is making games that make money through predatory methods. They are a trash company. They're a trash company. That's all they are. They're dead. The Blizzard you love, dead, gone. Activision, if you ever loved them, gone. So, back to this lawsuit. No longer, the lawsuit states, with the announced merger, Kotick will be able to escape liability entirely and will instead continue to serve as an executive after the merger closes. Worse, despite his potential liability for breaches of fiduciary duty, the board allowed Kotick himself to negotiate the transaction with Microsoft. The board's decision to entrust Kotick with the negotiations process is inexcusable for the additional reason that Kotick stands to personally receive substantial material benefits, whose value is not directly aligned with the merger price. I mean, it's a fair comment. Also, how can you have someone who might be guilty of violating fiduciary duty be the guy that's heading up the negotiation of a sale of the entire company? And then, remember, and we talked about this in another video, they were accused of insider trading. Remember how 3 of Bobby Kotick's real good mates, his close associates, all decided that they were going to suddenly buy $108 million worth of shares between them just days before the Microsoft acquisition happened. Wow, what a coincidence. Absolutely incredible. Definitely nothing to see there, guys. Whizzle, whizzle, woozle, right? These highly suspicious trades stand to deliver the three Kotick affiliates a windfall of more than 100 million. Kotick's continued suspected misconduct, even after the merger was agreed to further, underscores the fact that Kotick was unfit to negotiate the merger on behalf of the company. So anyway, the lawsuit essentially further reiterates we want to see the books and ledgers of the company and get an idea about all of this stuff that's been going on around that topic. Now, it gets it gets wild because you'll love this story. I'm sure you saw this headline. Remember the harassment lawsuit? Well, in the build-up to the sexual harassment lawsuit, what they decided to do was, let's have our own investigation, very much like what we saw with TSM, like all these companies do. And don't worry, we're hiring external counsel, and even though we're paying them, they're completely independent, and we've removed ourselves from the process, and it's all going to be fine. Well, guess what? Despite all of the anecdotal evidence you've heard, despite everything you've heard, Activision have ruled that there was no widespread harassment at Activision. There wasn't any. Everyone imagined it. It was a hallucination. Over the last 12 months, 2 major lawsuits have been filed against Activision, claiming that some of its employees are victims of gender and sexual harassment, and that some of the company's directors, despite being aware of various instances of misconduct, had failed to take appropriate action. In response, Activision launched its own internal investigation into company practices and has published findings which claim that the Call of Duty publisher does not have a systemic issue with harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. While there are some substantiated instances of gender harassment, Activision says, those unfortunate circumstances do not support the conclusion that Activision senior leadership or the board were aware of and tolerated gender harassment, or that there was ever a systemic issue with harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. Contrary to many of the allegations, the board and its external advisors have determined that there is no evidence to suggest that Activision Blizzard senior executives ever intentionally ignored or attempted to downplay the instances of gender harassment that occurred and were reported. The initial lawsuit against Activision, filed in July 2021 by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, accused the company of promoting a frat boy culture, where some employees were subject to constant sexual harassment, unequal pay, and retaliation. So, Activision, I mean, you can even, by the way, look at the whole, because it's just up there for you to see. But it's just so dry. I was going to spare you a little bit by just reading this summary, but it's just up there on their website. If you go to the investor.activision.com, you can read it there, and it's very dry. And basically, we did nothing wrong ever. God bleeding blimey, governor. Next up, they've obviously been trying to deal with all of this and which way are we going to go and how are we going to improve the company. Because remember, Microsoft have said themselves, coming in on the acquisition, we've got a ton of concerns about the way that this, the way this business works, the way everything's going. We don't necessarily want to keep certain parties in place, and we probably won't. So everyone's moving all the furniture around and trying to figure out what's going on. And remember, they're a public company. They've got shareholders. And when you have shareholders, you're beholden to the shareholders. You have to, you take votes. You do things they want. There's meetings and evidence and everything else. And you can see Activision Blizzard shareholders vote in favor of harassment report, despite the board's objections. The board didn't want to have a report on the company's efforts to combat abuse and discrimination in the workplace. So you can see here, the board argued that having to prepare another report would divert resources that could be more effectively used elsewhere, and furthermore would create a set of metrics that are simply not the best measures of how the company is responding to employee concerns. At today's annual meeting, however, shareholders rejected that argument and voted decisively in favour of the creation of the report. Roughly 67% of the voting shares cast their ballot in favour of the report. Activision said in a statement, but that doesn't necessarily mean the report will happen. The voting is non-binding, meaning that it's more of an advisory thing than an obligation. The board of directors, of course, said they will think about it. So remember, they're super committed to fixing all these problems. Will you do an investigation and compile a report for the shareholders? Now, we don't think that'd be very helpful. We don't think that'd be helpful at all. In fact, we'd strongly advise against it. 2/3 of the voting board come out, all the voting shares, say, no, we'd really, really like that, actually. And then because of how fucked up it all is, they don't even have to do it and have gone, yeah, well, we'll think about it then, since it's 2/3 of you want it. And the obvious reason you avoid having yet another report into your practices is obviously you're going to find that you did fucked up things. It's not going to help. It's going to be yet another negative headline, the only type of headline Activision Blizzard generate these days. And you can see they put this statement out. Consistent with our ongoing commitments, we will carefully consider the proposal to enhance our future disclosures. Activision Blizzard remains deeply committed to a respectful, welcoming workplace for all colleagues. The board said, we believe that transparency, just not reports, we believe that transparency with our stakeholders is critical to our commitment to the very best governance practices. The board greatly values our stockholders' perspectives, the ones that we absolutely adamantly advised against and don't want to do. The likelihood of the report being produced at this time is anybody's guess. A 67% vote in favour signals discontent with the way that reports of long-standing misconduct at Activision Blizzard have so far been handled and should probably not be ignored. On the other hand, shareholders voted in line with the board's recommendation across the board otherwise, and in far more overwhelming numbers, including a near-universal rejection of a proposed employee-selected representative to the board of directors. So this was the other aspect to it. They were like, listen, because we're generating so many employee concerns, why don't we have an employee representative elected in a board position? You vote them in, they sit on the board, all employee concerns are given to them, an employee, not someone from the board culture, not somebody you've brought in, somebody that's voted for by all the employees, essentially. And everyone said, no, that's a bad idea. We don't want too much power to the people. We want to create this wonderful, inviting, welcoming workplace. But if we have to actually have a conduit for those complaints and everything else, we're not about that life. We're not going to do that. So here you go. 88%, these are some of the other things that happened at the meeting. 88% of the voting shares approved the company's executive compensation. 97% of the voting shares ratified the appointment of PwC as the company's independent registered public accounting firm. Approximately 95% of the voting shares voted against the non-binding stockholder proposal regarding the nomination of an employee representative director. 95% of people just don't want that at all. We can't have the riffraff telling us what to do. We got money to make. The nomination of an employee representative to the Activision board of directors was another idea that shareholders had urged, but the board urged that they vote against it because allowing employees to select their own representative would replace the careful judgment of the board as to the criteria that should be reflected in a director candidate pool. Only we can choose who's fit to sit on the board, us board members, not you guys. The board and nominating and corporate governance committee must have discretion to determine the director criteria to best serve the shareholders of the company, as this continually evolving criteria is necessary to help guide the company in achieving its strategic priorities and managing risk. This is particularly important in light of the scope and complexity of the company's business. Providing non-management employees with a dedicated position on the board, utilizing a different process for board representation, or applying a different set of qualifications would adversely affect the role of the board in this process. So you don't even get your rep. We're super committed, but actually we really like boardroom culture, the way things are right now. And of course, just to underline how actually they're not committed and they don't care, was today's story, which is on Rock, Paper, Shotgun. So again, apologies for the archive link. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick is re-elected to the board for another year. The big news. You had your chance. And nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to get rid of this guy. Nobody wants, doesn't matter what he does, doesn't matter how many negative headlines. Right, keep in mind, just off the top of my fucking head, apart from the fact that at any other company, when shit like this goes down, the CEO has to fall on their fucking metaphorical sword to protect the company from all the negative headlines. Forget the fact that he said that he's shocked to hear about negative treatment of women, and then the Wall Street Journal ran a story about him threatening to kill a female employee, his assistant. Forget the fact that his ex-girlfriend, I believe, was leveraging her role at Facebook to have negative stories about the company spiked. Forget all of the multiple lawsuits. Forget the allegations of insider trading. Forget the fact the only reason you're going to be fucking Microsoft's bitch now is pretty much because of every decision he made. You still let this motherfucker negotiate the deal, and then it's like, listen, you can there's an election, maybe we just don't want him around. And no, they still think this is the guy to guide this company, particularly the justification. And remember, he's not on the board of fucking Coca-Cola anymore, that he sat on for something like 12 years, because they deemed him to be fucking, too hot for TV, let's say, because he's the guy to get the deal done. He's the guy to get the deal done. So, the Activision Blizzard CEO, Bobby Kotick, was successfully re-elected to the board of directors for another year as a result of the company's annual shareholder meeting yesterday. This was despite efforts by company employees and shareholders to oust Kotick. Remember, there were widespread walkouts calling for his resignation. There were even some high-profile relatively high-profile, I guess, within the term of a corporation as big as this. You would call them middle-tier managers, but there were managerial figures that called him out, not to mention every other fucking, games journalist and now mainstream press, all circling like sharks in a tank, publishing all of his shit, laying it all bare. Many of the games journalists, by the way, absolutely complicit, because you can buy a journalist's ethical integrity for a fucking goodie bag and an early access Steam key. But, now those days are over for Bobby Kotick. Everyone knows he's a piece of shit. We want the piece of shit to go. It's just boom. The hits just keep coming over and over and over and over again. But no, they've said they were going to carefully consider everything that's been said and everything that's going on and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, they believe Bobby Kotick is still the right guy for the job. You can see here as well that, consistent with our ongoing commitments, we'll carefully consider the proposal to enhance further disclosures. Activision Blizzard remains deeply committed to a respectful, welcoming workplace for all our colleagues. And that was from Jessica Gonzalez, who's one of the founders of the Activision Blizzard employee advocacy group, A Better ABK. No, that's a separate thing. Jessica Gonzalez is the founder of that, and she tweeted in reference to the proposed reports, the employees are going to hold them to it. Now, I don't see what you can really do. You've had your call for a representative at the highest level rebuffed. You've had a union brought in at one of your offices for the first time in what's a historical agreement, because Americans are weird about unions. But again, any agreement that the company and the union come to, it's non-binding in any way, shape or form. The board can change its mind at any time. And on top of that, you had in the palm of your hand an opportunity to make a powerful statement about wanting to commit to change by the removal of Bobby Kotick. But because you want him to hold the reins on the Microsoft deal, a deal he should never have been allowed to make in the first place, you're going to allow him to stay on. The company is a joke. It's just rotten to the fucking core. I don't know how anybody can think otherwise at this point.